You remember her eyes, don't you? Not as they were, but as they watched, as if they already knew what you would become beneath her silence, as if she was not waiting for your love, but for your failure. There was a question in her gaze, sharp and unspoken, that you could never answer, not with flowers, not with promises, not even with pain. You called it intimacy, she called it the first trial. She smiled like spring, but studied you like winter, every gesture sweetened by distance, every touch laced with delay. You told yourself she was shy, but wasn't it strange how much control she had while pretending to surrender? How every moment felt like you were chasing a shadow that knew exactly where to pause. You still hear it, the echo of her silence, when you gave her everything. That silence wasn't absence, it was judgment, and it came not from hatred, but from something older than desire. She was never asking, "Do you love me?" She was asking something far more ancient, "Will you vanish if I don't?" And you did. She appears as the maiden, but tests you like the queen. What you call love is the ritual she uses to weigh your myth. You saw her and thought she is soft, gentle, an open field of warmth waiting to be crossed. But you misunderstood the light. It was not an invitation. It was a veil. The innocence you fell into was not the absence of cunning, but the perfected shape of it. She doesn't wield power by force. She evokes it through the performance of fragility. You believed she was asking to be protected, but beneath that silence, she was counting not your virtues, but your weaknesses. You mistook passivity for purity, yet every pause, every sigh, every delay was a calculated move in an ancient game you were too proud to see. You think she wants love. She doesn't. Not the kind you understand. She wants power hidden beneath the ritual of longing. And her method is myth. She wears the archetype of the maiden, but her soul walks in the footsteps of the empress. Not because she wants to conquer you, but because she wants to watch what you become in her presence. That is the test. Not your devotion, not your honesty, not your tenderness. She tests for myth, for presence, for force. She wants to see if your love has gravity or if it collapses under her silence. She pulls away not because she is confused, but because she wants to see if you chase. She withholds affection not because she doubts, but because she wants to see if you beg. Every hesitation, every sudden coldness, every sweet withdrawal, it's not random, it's orchestration. And you, the fool with trembling hands, mistake it for her wounds. You comfort her, you wait, you ache. She watches, not with cruelty, but with instinct. This is how the feminine weighs the soul of a man, through delay, not demand. She never says what she wants. She lets you offer, and every offer reveals the shape of your hunger. She watches what you trade for closeness, your time, your honesty, your freedom. One by one, you place them at her feet like ancient coins, not knowing she never asked for any of it. She is not moved by what you give. She is moved by what you refuse to give away, even for her. The boundary you won't cross, the dignity you won't lose. That is the altar she watches, not the one you build from roses and apologies. And when you ask, "Why are you pulling away?" she does not answer, because she's not pulling away. She's ascending. She rises in the myth you failed to see, from maiden to goddess. And a goddess does not explain. She only reveals herself to the one who can see through illusion. Your tears mean nothing here. Your declarations echo in the wrong chamber. You are not failing because you are unworthy. You are failing because you still think this is about love. It isn't. It is about recognition. Do you recognize the stage? Do you see the veil? Do you sense the mirror? Every gesture she makes is symbolic. Every silence, a riddle. And you, the logical one, the sincere one, respond with facts, clarity, reassurance. But this is not the realm of facts. It is the realm of archetypes. She does not want to understand you. She wants to feel if your myth can hold her chaos without cracking. She wants to dance at the edge of destruction and know you will not shatter, not for her, not for the world. You think she punishes you when you grow distant, but she respects it more than your devotion. She leans in closer to the one who does not explain, who does not need her gaze to exist, who does not seek softness from her to feel whole. For that man, she will crumble. For that man, she will kneel. But not for the one who offers everything at once. Not for the one who dissolves just to please her moods. You were taught to give, and so you gave. But giving, in the absence of self-possession, is self-betrayal. She doesn't want your surrender. She wants your sovereignty. She wants to see if you still stand when she turns her back, when she grows cold, when she disappears into the woods of her silence. She wants to look over her shoulder and see you unmoved. Not heartless, just intact. Intact enough to meet her as an equal. Not a worshipper. Because beneath every smile she gives you, there is a darker force watching. The queen, the priestess, the oracle. And they do not measure by sweetness. They measure by fire, by what burns and remains. You thought you were in love, but what you entered was a rite, a psychological initiation. And when you broke, when you melted, when you chased, when you collapsed, she saw what she needed. You were not ready. You believed she was the test, but no, you were being measured by the myth you awakened in her presence. Did you rise as king or fall as servant? Did you hold your gaze or did you beg for hers? You were never just dating. You were being weighed in symbolic silence. And she, the one who says nothing, already made her judgment before you ever heard her lips say no. So now you walk away, wounded, calling it manipulation, calling it games. But the truth is darker. It wasn't a game, it was a mirror. And what you saw was not her cruelty, but your own illusion of what love was supposed to be. She never promised safety. She never said forever. She simply opened the door to the myth and watched how you walked in, desperate or complete. The myth of the innocent woman is the first mask. Behind it, always, is the queen. And the queen is not interested in boys pretending to be gods. She wants the real, the silent, the immovable. She wants the man who sees through the mask and bows not to her charm, but to the truth behind her eyes. The truth that you, too, carry an archetype, and until you wear it without apology, you are just another name in her forgotten script. Say you loved her. Say you gave everything. She does not remember, because none of that mattered. What mattered was how you stood when she tested your absence, and in that moment you weren't there. Only your hunger remained. And hunger, no matter how sweet, never passes the test. Not in her world, not in the myth, not in the dream. Now she returns to silence, and you are left with the echo of the trapdoor you never saw open, the one beneath your own performance, where the innocent girl became the queen, and the lover became the lesson. The moment you beg to be chosen, you vanish from her dream. She only kneels to the man who walks past her throne. You remember the moment you thought she was yours, not when she said yes, not when she kissed you, but when she smiled after you gave her something she never asked for. A gesture, a promise, a sacrifice. You believed the more you gave, the deeper her love would grow. But in truth, the more you surrendered, the more her gaze wandered. Not out of cruelty, but because something had cracked not in her, but in the myth you were meant to embody. She did not dream of the man who kneels. She dreamed of the one who does not ask to be chosen, the one who simply is. You think this is about attention, about being liked. But no, the feminine psyche, in its deepest mythic dimension, does not respond to need. It responds to gravity. You cannot ask to be chosen. You cannot earn it. Every gesture that says, "Please see me," kills the very quality she is searching for. The approval you seek, that smile, that warmth, that intimacy, is the very proof that you are no longer standing in your power. And once that scent of hunger rises, the archetype shifts. You are no longer the hero. You are the supplicant. And the dream ends there. She tests, yes, but not for perfection, not for performance. She tests for solidity. She wants to press against your edges and feel steel. She wants to offer you chaos, distance, contradiction, and see if you remain you. Not flatter her, not fold, not explain, simply remain. That is how she feels safe. Not when you tell her, "I'll never leave," but when she knows she could and you would still remain whole. You become her mirror when you no longer distort yourself to reflect her. But you distorted yourself. You thought that to love her was to become soft, to listen too much, to change too fast, to kneel in apology for sins you did not commit. And at first, she may smile, she may even reward you, but over time, she withers, she withdraws. Not because she does not feel affection, but because her instinct can no longer trust you. You have become too malleable, too influenced by her storms, and the deep feminine does not want control. She wants to lose control in the presence of something unshakable, something she can finally surrender to without fear. But instead, you became attentive, available, eager. You followed every text with urgency. You read her mood like scripture. You asked what's wrong. You waited, you reassured, you dissolved. And in doing so, you disappeared. She cannot desire what is not there, and you were no longer there. Only your need remained wrapped in tenderness, framed in good intentions, but still hunger, still absence of self. You did not protect her from the storm. You became the storm's servant, and she could never forgive that. You think love is about proving, but the one who proves is already forgotten. In myth, the man who is loved by the goddess does not beg. He does not ask. He does not explain. He walks through the forest of her tests without flinching. And it is that walk, that quiet refusal to collapse, that awakens her surrender. You do not win her by chasing. You win her by withdrawing into depth, into silence, into presence. She will find you there, or she won't, and still you remain. But you didn't remain. You performed. You presented your wounds. You shared too much, too soon. You invited her into places within you that were not sacred but scattered. And though she listened, something in her withdrew. The feminine opens to mystery, not exposure. She wants to discover your soul, not be shown its every scar. She wants the ritual of unwrapping, of stumbling into your fire, not being handed ashes. She wants to earn the right to know you not be offered your depths before she has bled for them. You thought vulnerability was the key, but no, not in the beginning. Not when your frame is still forming. Vulnerability without weight becomes confession, and confession is for the priest, not the queen. She is not here to heal you. She is here to reveal you. And she can only do that through contrast, through resistance, through friction. She tests not because she wants you to suffer. She tests because she wants to see if you even exist beyond the approval you seek. And if you do not, she cannot desire you, no matter how much she wants to. There was a moment, a sharp one, when she grew colder. You sensed it. You asked why. She said nothing, because she couldn't explain. Not in words. The myth does not speak in language. It moves in symbols, in pauses, in sudden distance. And in that moment, you were being asked the real question: will you chase, or will you remain? Will you dissolve for her affection, Or will you retreat into yourself with gravity you chased? And she knew, not consciously, but mythically. Her body remembered something her mind could not say. This is not the one. He cannot hold me. He cannot bear my storm. He needs my yes to feel real. And the one who needs my yes will break the moment I say no. So she withdrew, slowly, at first, then completely, and you are left with confusion, with rage, with heartbreak. Not because she betrayed you, but because you betrayed the myth she was trying to awaken in you. The hero dies the moment he kneels for her gaze. The gaze must be earned, yes, but not through effort, through being, through standing still in the fire of her tests and saying nothing. Not in defiance, not in manipulation, but because you do not need to be chosen to know who you are. And in that knowing, she might fall. She might not. That is not the point. The point is that you are no longer chasing something outside of you to complete what was never broken. She dreams of the man who disappears into himself and returns with fire in his eyes, who does not react, who does not collapse, who listens, yes, but with the stillness of a mountain, not the trembling of a boy. That is how she tests, not for loyalty, not for sweetness, but for the weight of the eternal. And when she feels it, she softens, she kneels, she follows, not because she was conquered, but because she was met. But you never met her. You performed, you flattered, you chased, you begged to be seen. And in doing so, you vanished from the dream she was casting. You stepped out of the archetype and became a man again, ordinary, eager, bleeding for affection. And there is no myth written for that. The gaze you lost was not love. It was recognition. She was looking for the mirror of her own mystery, and you gave her your wounds. She was walking toward the altar of herself, and you pulled her into your need. She wanted to rise, and you asked her to bend. And now, alone, you still do not see she was never asking for love. She was asking if you had the form to hold her, not the desire, not the words, the form, and that you never shaped. Even if you win her, you lose the self she was testing for. Love becomes a crown of thorns when you wear it for her gaze. You thought you passed the test. You thought that because she stayed, smiled, said yes, that the battle was won. But the soul does not surrender to surface victories. It surrenders only to what cannot be moved, and the moment she became yours, you began the slow collapse of the self she was once drawn to. Power is the illusion you swallowed. You believed she wanted to be conquered, but what she truly wanted was to be mirrored. And when she saw that you confused possession with presence, she began to vanish again, this time without leaving. You sat beside her, you touched her, you called her yours, but something was no longer awake in her gaze. That quiet reverence she once held for you gone, and you wondered why. You did everything she wanted. You became everything she needed. And that was precisely the problem. You stopped being the unknown. You became a servant to her image of you. You became the man she could mold. And even if her lips said I love you, her soul whispered I no longer respect you. Because the man who wins her must forget her to stay free. He must walk past her throne even when she calls. He must dare to be untouched by her approval, unbroken by her withdrawal. He must be willing to lose her to remain himself. And you were not. You stayed too long in her orbit. You made her the sun. You let her warmth define your value. And in doing so, you abandoned the very fire that once drew her near. Do you understand the feminine does not seek submission? She seeks sovereignty, not hers yours. When you give her power over your identity, over your meaning, over your rhythm, she does not rise with joy. She descends into suspicion, not because she is ungrateful, but because her deeper instincts know the man who lives for her gaze cannot be trusted with her depths. He will fracture the moment she stops smiling. He will rage the moment she withdraws. He will die the moment she stops choosing him. You became predictable, soft, your edges dulled by her approval. You began to speak in her language, shape yourself to her moods, bend to her absence. You turned love into performance, and she, the one who once longed for your mystery, now sits in silence beside your empty throne. You thought she craved your power, but all she ever wanted was to see you hold it, untouched by her influence. Not use it to win her, not offer it to buy her loyalty, but simply carry it, like a flame that does not dim for any gaze. You were never supposed to conquer her. You were supposed to remain unmoved, not emotionally dead, but existentially whole. Her chaos was never a trap. It was a storm sent to test your architecture. Would you crumble for closeness? Would you shapeshift for peace? Would you dilute your edge for affection? And you did. And so her surrender, if it came only in fragments, hesitant, half-hearted, because part of her always knew this man is mine. Yes, but he is also no longer his own. That is the final illusion. To win her is to risk losing yourself. And unless you can lose her while remaining yourself, you were never worthy of her in the first place. Because what she truly surrenders to is not your love, not your desire, not your vows. She surrenders to your refusal to collapse, to your sacred indifference, not the coldness of a detached man, but the silent knowing of one who has already met himself in solitude and does not beg for mirrors. But you begged. Not always in words, sometimes in silence, in compromise, in the way you withheld your truth to avoid tension, in the way you smiled when you meant to speak, in the way you said yes when your soul whispered no. She noticed. The feminine always notices, not with logic, with breath, with body. She smelled the collapse before you did, and she withdrew again. And you called it confusion. You blamed her contradictions. You said she was too difficult, too unclear. But the truth was clear. You traded your selfhood for her warmth. And now you sit in a cage you built with your own hands, wondering why the goddess no longer sings in your presence. She does not sing for men who echo back her voice. She sings for men who do not flinch at the silence between notes, who do not fear the distance, who do not bend their melody to match hers. You wore your power like perfume to attract, to influence, but true power is scentless. It is not worn. It is not used. It is carried like a sacred burden. A man does not use his presence to seduce. He becomes presence, with or without seduction. And that is what breaks her, not your strategies, but your stillness. The rare and mythic stillness of a man who remains unchanged in both storm and sun. You became who she wanted, but not who she respected. You gave her your heart, but not your spine. And love without form becomes weightless. She cannot root into it. She cannot trust it. It may move her, yes, but it cannot hold her. And so she floats away, even as she stays. She loves you, but no longer believes in you. And that is a grief far colder than rejection. You were not supposed to seek her approval. You were supposed to seek the self she awakened, not fall into her arms, but walk past them. And in that refusal to orbit her, she would have followed you to the edge of the world, not as a prize, not as a trophy, but as a woman who finally saw a man she could lean into without breaking him. But instead, she broke you, not with malice, with testing, with silence, with subtle withdrawal, and you responded not with presence, but with panic, not with gravity, but with gifts. You tried to buy back the myth with devotion, but devotion is only holy when it emerges from freedom, not fear. And she knew. She always knows. Now, If she returns, she does so to a hollow version of what once made her kneel. She kisses a mouth that echoes her words. She sleeps beside a man who was once a myth, now a memory. And you live in the quiet dread of knowing you lost her not when she left, but when you gave her the crown she never asked for. She wanted your strength, not your surrender, your gaze, not your obedience, your fire, not your warmth. And in chasing her love, you abandoned the very self she was testing for. Now she stands at the edge of your life like a ghost, a reminder that you were never meant to win her. You were meant to meet yourself through her, and having failed, you are now left with the ashes of a seduction that dissolved the man she once believed in. That is the final illusion. Not that she deceived you, but that you thought you had something to prove. You never did. You only had something to become. And now, without her gaze, without her hand, without her silence to mirror your lack, you are finally alone, as you always were, as you must be to find what remains unbroken in you. And if you ever see her again in a crowd, in a dream, in the scent of a season that once held her breath, do not ask for her smile. Ask only if you found the self who no longer waits for it. Somewhere in the ruins of a dream, a man stands before a mirror that does not reflect. He waits for her shadow to reappear, but only silence remains. Not absence, not loss, just the stillness of a myth that no longer plays for him. In the distance, a woman dances alone beneath a tree that never bore fruit. She once whispered a name he no longer carries. She once tested a soul he never became. You ask, will she return? But the myth does not repeat, it only evolves. And if the crown is ever offered again, it will not be for the one who reaches. It will be for the one who remains seated unmoved, unseen, unnamed. The throne was never hers. The test was never hers. It was yours. And you failed not because you lost her, but because you forgot who you were before she arrived.